Most people think that they're doing okay with money, but most secretly aren't. After 15 years working in finance, I've seen 9 hidden signs that someone is quietly falling behind financially. These mistakes don't hit you like an anvil. They're more like a slow puncture, constantly draining your progress and costing you the financial freedom you're aiming for. And the worst part is, they're avoidable, yet most people fall into these traps anyway. This is a scene from a TV show that captures this perfectly, and I'll come back to it later on in the video. Your income isn't growing. Now, for the vast majority of people, their income is the primary way that they will grow their wealth. You might have a house that's going up in value, pensions and investment accounts, but pretty much all of that starts with your income. It is frankly the genesis of your wealth building career. But this is where the problems start. Inflation erodes your purchasing power, so you're getting worse off every year. And let me illustrate this to you with a Freddo. Now, just stick with me on this one. The price of a Freddo in the year 2000 was just 10p. Just to put this into context, 2000 was the year of the Gladiator movie, Mission Impossible 2, and the first X-Men movie. And much like the Freddo, they are apparently still making all of those things. Inflation will erode the value of your income because your fixed income will buy, say, fewer cinema tickets to see Gladiator 2 in 2025 than it did to see the original Gladiator in 2000. You see what I mean about inflation? But there are more chips you can play than you might think. But one of the best ways is to get better at negotiating. This is something that is so often overlooked. Negotiating works. While the research found less than half of Americans negotiated their current salary, among those who counted on salary, benefits or other compensation, 85% got at least some or all of what they asked for. This can be one of the most crucial signs that you might be falling behind financially. Because if your income isn't keeping up with inflation, then you are literally falling behind financially. Your overheads eat you alive. Now, in the age of the FIRE movement, that's the financial independence retire early folks, these are the people who are screaming at you for daring to buy a coffee. And whilst I do have my criticisms of the FIRE movement, I do think they have some reasonable points on some of this stuff. Let me explain. When times get tighter and you have no choice but to cut back, but you've got massive fixed overheads, then you can't cut back your expending that much. This covers things like massive mortgage or rental payments, car financing costs, personal loans. It's not like eating out or, dare I say it, spending less on coffee. Those are things that are more within your control. But if your fixed costs are too high, then it gives you fewer and fewer options to cut back when you actually need to. Now, clearly, with housing affordability getting much, much worse over the last 30 or 40 years, with affordability levels not seen since the Napoleonic War, this is not something that is entirely within your control. And when you take a look at this analysis from the good folks at the IFS, you can see that the percentage of income that people spend on housing has steadily increased since the late 1960s. But I think early on in this video, we really need to differentiate between people who choose to spend a lot of money on things they just don't need, compared to people who have to spend a lot of their income just to cover the essentials. You rely on a single income source. I like this Warren Buffett quote from back in the day. Never depend on a single income. Make investment to create a second source. And that's because this is the problem. If your salary is the only source of income, then you're one step away from being broke. And seemingly every day there's a new report or study or press release that basically everyone and their dog are going to lose their jobs to AI, then job security kind of might be a bit more fragile than you think it is, even if you don't buy into this whole tech bro vision of the future. Because here's the truth. A single income acts as a single point of failure in your finances, and that's a problem. Take a look at this. The average US millionaire has 7 sources of income. And when you think about it, it does make a load of sense. You can get to your finance goals faster. You can make your side income compound over time, just like your salary. It gives you options when you're moving jobs. And maybe most importantly, is it can give you the opportunity to create scalable income. All of these are great reasons why having 2 or more income sources can be a real money hack. And I just think the underrated part of this conversation is that you don't have to cast your net really wide when you're deciding what your second income is going to be. Like, you don't have to stick to the traditional stuff like being an Etsy seller or an eBay hustler or a Vinted pirate or any of the more cliched side hustles. You can diversify your industries. So if you work in recruitment and there's a downturn, there are going to be loads of people looking for jobs. So maybe you offer, say, CV writing skills, or the best way to find a job. You don't think before spending money. The US spent an average of $1 trillion per year in World War II when you adjust for inflation. Today, the total global spend on marketing and advertising is also around $1 trillion per year. Just think about it for a second. About as much money is spent every year to try and separate you from your hard-earned cash as went into defeating the Axis powers. And this is why I don't really love the idea of kind of flogging yourself for an impulse purchase, because there are companies out there with all the money in the world, all the data in the world, and all the incentives in the world to get you to spend your money. But this is nonetheless a sign that you could be falling behind. Wealth is built not just on the money that you earn, but on the money that you keep. So here are a few very simple frameworks that you can use. Opportunity cost. You can only spend your money once, so deciding how and where you want to spend it is kind of very revealing about you and what your priorities are. Ask yourself, are you buying for utility or status? A good example. If no one ever saw you driving that car, wearing that watch, or living in that big house, would you still get as much happiness out of it? Marginal cost. Can you get most of the benefit for less of the cost? The 24-hour rule. So before you decide to spend some money on something, just wait 24 hours and see if you still want to buy it, and maybe extend it to 30 days for bigger purchases. Think about time. Here's another good one. Just ask yourself, how long would it take you to earn the money that you're about to spend? My view on this has always been quite consistent, and that is spending a little more on the things that you actually enjoy, the things that really bring joy to your life, and cut costs aggressively everywhere else in your life. It's not necessarily about spending less, but about getting more from the money that you do spend. You are saving too much. Now, this one might seem controversial, but stick with me on this one. Now, clearly, it goes without saying that saving is very crucial for financial stability, but that's all it's there for, because it's investing that builds wealth, not saving. The idea of the notion or the imperative for frugality and saving would be all you would need to worry about to have financial security. But that completely leaves out the focus that you should be putting onto investing and the massive role that it can play in your wealth building journey. And I get it. Plenty of people avoid investing because they think it's gambling, they think they'll lose all their money, they think they need a professional to get started. But that's just not the case anymore. The truth is that investing has never been more accessible. Index funds offer diversification with kind of minimal knowledge requirements. And we find time and time again that index funds will often be actively managed funds. Your pension accounts and other tax-advantaged accounts like ISAs can help to really significantly boost your returns. Let's look at an example to illustrate what I mean. Say you save £500 a month over 30 years. If you were a saver and you got, say, 2% on average over that time, you'd have about £460,000. But if you invested and got an average rate of return of 10% per year, which is the average return of the S&P 500, more on that in a second, you would have a little over £1 million. Now, back to this average rate of return. Take a look here. This shows the annual return of the S&P 500. You can see here the ups and downs of the market, and frankly, this is understandably what worries people. But take a look at this graph instead. You can see big economic, political, and historical events, and the market still continues to go up. People continue to spend money, companies continue to buy stuff from one another, countries continue to trade. You're basically betting that the world will carry on spinning. This is one of the silent ways that you might be falling behind, even if it feels like you're doing everything else right. Now, this is all well and good, but take a look at this scene from The Bear that I really, really think illustrates what we're talking about.
And then I started at this really great place as a commie, and this other chef started the same day as me. And I thought we were competition, but really we weren't. He was better than me, much, much better than me.
I just want to pause here and come back to the second half of the video in a second. In this scene, Luca, played here by Will Poulter, outlines exactly what we're talking about. That you might think you're doing well, but actually when you take a step back and take a real look, you might be doing worse than you think. Back to the rest of the video.
So I started looking at it like it was a good thing. Like at least I knew who the best was now and I could take that pressure off myself. And the only logical thing to do was to try and keep up with him. So I never left this guy's side.
And you got better?
Oh, mate. I got better than I ever thought I possibly could be, just from trying to keep up with him.
It's basically about intentionally finding people that are ahead of you, not to compare yourself to them, but to learn from them. What were the money moves that they made which really moved the needle for them? Was it giving up coffee? Unlikely. Or was it finding a way to increase their savings rate by just 0.5% every year? That would pay for a lifetime of coffees. But the thing that really defines you is what you decide to do once you realise that you are behind. Either bury your head in the sand or do something to take action to make a difference. Let's get back to the rest of the video. You don't invest in personal growth. The most valuable investment is often in yourself. Now, we talked right at the start of the video that for most people, their biggest wealth building tool will be their own income. And yet it's not high on most people's lists when it comes to things they want to invest in. But there is a catch. People with a wealth mindset, or let's call it a growth mindset, consistently invest in expanding their skills, their knowledge, their networks, their qualifications, because they understand that personal growth can directly influence your earning potential. Put it this way. If you could invest £1,000 or spend £1,000 on yourself to get a qualification in your field, kind of no matter what your field is, but then the following year you get a £2,000 pay rise, then you've doubled your investment in a year. But as we mentioned, this also has a compounding effect on your income for all your future earning years. So this is why investing in yourself and taking bets on yourself early on in your career can be so powerful. Better than any stock market return, frankly, and just for the purposes of comparison. If you put the same £1,000 into a global index fund, then it would take almost a decade to double in size. You don't save and invest regularly. You have got to get into the mindset of becoming a consistent investor, not a sporadic saver. Let me explain. There was this report from Motley Fool where they used this example. If you had invested $10,000 in 2002 and not withdrawn any money, that would be worth about $64,000. Take a look at this passage here. For example, over the last 20 years, if you stayed fully invested in an S&P 500 index fund, your money should have grown by 9.8%. Just to clarify, that's the average per year growth rate. But if you sold during a market downturn and then missed those 10 best days, your portfolio would be less than half that, just 5.6%. And missing the best 20 days would cut your return by more than 70%. So this tells us that maximizing your time in the market will be one of the key ways to invest. Now, I know we mentioned earlier in the video about the importance of investing and so on, but I think the point here is kind of separate, which is that you need to invest consistently and make sure you stay invested. And let's just take a look at this study. This study is called Trading is Hazardous for Your Wealth. This paper looked at over 66,000 people from the year 2000 and found two interesting things. What they called the hyperactive trader underperformed the market by a massive 5.5% per year. They then also had what they called the risk-adjusted failure. That is that the most active traders lagged by 10.3% annually. And there's this nice summary right at the end of the paper. Those who trade the most are hurt the most. You don't have an emergency fund. Earlier on in the video, we talked about not relying on a single income. Well, in the event that you do lose your job, your emergency fund will be the first thing that you will need to call on in order to keep covering your bills. Now, there's a whole load of opinions here, but the recommendations for the size of your emergency fund are generally between 3 and 6 months of your living expenses. I personally take a bit more of a nuanced approach, and whilst these are good benchmarks, it ultimately depends on your specific circumstances. If you're employed rather than self-employed and get a consistent paycheck, your overheads aren't eating you alive every month, then you don't necessarily have to be as prudent as 6 months. If, however, you're self-employed, work can be a bit more sporadic, then 6 months or maybe more can be much more reasonable. But at the end of the day, it's down to your personal preference and attitude to risk. Now, let me save some folks the trouble here. Yes, we have already talked in this video about how saving and investing is a key part of building wealth. So this leads to an obvious question. Why wouldn't you invest this money rather than having 3 to 6 months of your expenses tied up in a savings account which is barely beating inflation? Aren't I contradicting myself? There's an opportunity cost attached to having that money sitting there, not doing a whole lot. But that, however, completely misses the point of an emergency fund. The point of an emergency fund, you don't know what the market is going to be doing when you need that money. But let's just summarize why an emergency fund is so important. It protects you from going into debt. Look, an emergency fund doesn't have to cover the absolute catastrophe of you losing your job or something like that. It can cover those more sort of, run-of-the-mill but unexpected expenses. Car repairs, boiler breakdown, washing machine gives up the go, all of those sorts of things. Second, it gives you a bit of breathing room during a crisis. At the end of the day, having a bit of money you can fall back on means that you could take the job that you actually want, not necessarily the job that you have to have because you need that cash flow coming in every month. This is a critical part of making sure you aren't falling behind financially, because you might be doing well, but if you need this money constantly coming in, you're a sort of high income, high expense household, and you don't have an emergency fund, then you may well start to fall behind quite quickly. You don't have sufficient insurance. I still stand by this one, and I know we discussed this one in another video recently. Link will be at the end. But let's just delve into the numbers here. only 45% of UK adults have life insurance, only 14% of UK adults have income protection, and about 31% of UK adults do not have contents insurance. Now, insurance is one of those policies that you should simultaneously have but hope to never need. And so in that case, I do kind of understand why people might view insurance as being a waste of money. It's like spending money and hoping you don't get anything out of it. But that completely misses the point. Insurance isn't necessarily about making money. It's about protecting everything that you've already built. Just think about it another way. Most people, as the number suggests, will insure their phone, their car, even their holiday, but they won't insure the single most important asset that they have, their ability to earn income. We mentioned right at the start of the video that your income will be the biggest way that most people will build wealth. So why wouldn't you protect it? And that's kind of strange when you think about it, because for most people, their future earnings are by far and away going to be worth more than anything else that they own. Just to give you an idea, if you earn, say, £40,000 a year and have 25 years left in your career, that is £1 million of future income you could choose to protect, but the data suggests that most people won't. The same thing applies to things like life insurance or critical illness cover. If your financial plan depends on your income continuing completely uninterrupted, then protecting that income should be part of the plan. According to the Association of British Insurers, insurers in the UK pay out £22 million every single day in life, critical illness and income protection. So this should really give you some idea about how frequently people rely on these safety nets. We have 3 videos on screen. We have top tips from ISA millionaires, pension mistakes that everyone is making, and signs that you might be doing better than the average Brit. You've been watching Modern Money Talk. If you like this video, please like and subscribe. It really helps the channel. Thanks for watching.